One of our patients just had a baby, and we had no idea she was pregnant.
Okay, is the baby
We were not
out?
prepared for that.
On an early December morning in 2018, a 29-year-old woman at a healthcare facility in Arizona gave birth to a healthy baby boy. However, the arrival of the child was unexpected, to say the least, as the mother was in a vegetative state and had been intermittently for 26 years. The birth and the story that followed sparked global outrage, and only now, 5 years on, has the body cam footage from that incident been published. So what led to a woman in a vegetative state, in a private nursing facility, being impregnated without anyone knowing right up until the birth? And was this a wake-up call on how vulnerable people in long-term care are at higher risk of sexual assault? Just a warning, this case is extremely disturbing, with detailed mentions of sexual abuse and assault. On December 29, 2018, law enforcement were called to Hacienda Healthcare, an adult private care facility in Phoenix, Arizona, after a patient there went into labor. The woman in question had been there since 1992. Now that is 26 years. Admitted at just 3 years old, she was nonverbal and was intellectually and physically disabled due to lifelong implications caused by childhood seizures. The seizures affected her motor and cognitive functions, including loss of functional use of her limbs and her speech. She had been in and out of a coma for the majority of her time at Hacienda. She had a very limited ability to move her head and her neck, and was capable of making small facial gestures in response to stimuli. However, she couldn't form any intelligible dialogue, meaning she was in absolutely no position to consent to sexual intercourse at any time, in any way, during any period of her life. So when nurses tended to her bedside the morning of December 29th as part of their daily rounds and discovered she was crowning, it was far from a miracle, rather a living nightmare. A source told KTVK that the victim had allegedly been moaning in discomfort that day, and then when one of the nurses went into her room to change her pad, she, quote, saw the baby coming.
When I looked, it wasn't really here, the baby coming.
Okay.
According to staff, and as heard on the 911 call, they allegedly had absolutely no idea she was pregnant. You'd wonder how they wouldn't know a patient in their full-time care was 9 months pregnant. Well, according to documents obtained by the HuffPost, they did notice the bump, but thought it was constipation or weight gain, and had subsequently administered her the appropriate treatment and even reduced her calorie intake. It not unreasonably wouldn't have crossed their minds she could be pregnant, as she couldn't even walk, let alone consent nor participate in consensual intercourse.
Is that on Winston?
I'm sorry. He's right there.
So what happened? What do you see?
The birth sent shockwaves through the facility. In body camera footage obtained by dailymail.com, you can see multiple staff members visibly shaken by the ordeal, many in tears of distress. Amid the emotion, police quickly tried to establish who was the primary care physician, the lead nurse, the primary nurse, the shift nurse, etc. But most importantly, who had access to her room and when? According to the lead nurse, in the years the victim had been there, she had only ever been visited by her sister, her brother, and her mother, and visitations were nearly always out in the day room. She reportedly never went home, was always either in her bed or her wheelchair, and was cared for by female caregivers only. On-call staff stated there were 2 male caregivers at Hacienda, yet they were on a completely different ward. The side of the facility the patient was in was strictly female care only, and male staff would only be on that side of the ward when they were passing through to take patients of their own to a different department. According to the lead practical nurse, all visitations had to be approved and they had to sign in on arrival, and again, the victim was only allowed female caregivers, so there was no obvious miscreant. So who could have raped and impregnated this woman right under the noses of her family and the staff? Immediately following the incident, a formal rape investigation was opened. In documents filed in May of 2019, the victim's attorney, John Michaels, cited a medical exam conducted on the day of the birth, which alleged that this wasn't the first time she had been sexually abused, and she may have suffered from multiple sexual assaults. The exam, performed by the Maricopa County Medical Center, found vaginal lacerations that were old and already healed, and they were not caused by the delivery of the baby. They also concluded the birth was a non-nulliparous event. Now, to break that down for you, a nulliparous woman or person is someone who has never been pregnant nor impregnated, which means the victim may well have been pregnant before. Michael stated that this is the opinion of the professional who examined her, but at a minimum, there were repeated violations evidenced by the physical scarring. Investigators latterly obtained a search warrant to oblige all male staffers to provide a DNA sample, and among them was 36-year-old nurse Nathan Sutherland. Sutherland had been a licensed nurse for over a decade and had worked at Hacienda for almost 7 years. The married father of 4 had a clean slate with the state's nursing board. According to documents from the Arizona Corporate Commission, in 2007 he'd started a charitable organization to help the homeless and developmentally impaired. Yet, when police obtained this man's DNA sample and ran it against the newborn child, it came back positive. He was immediately arrested and terminated from Hacienda by administrators. He also later agreed to relinquish his nursing license. On the 5th of February 2019, Sutherland entered a plea of not guilty during his arraignment at the Maricopa County Superior Court. Having been held on a $500,000 bond, he was charged with 1 count of sexual assault and 1 of the abuse of a vulnerable adult. His lawyer, Dave Gragan, claimed prosecutors lacked, quote, direct evidence of guilt, aside from a positive DNA match and him revoking his own license, and that the defense were to conduct their own DNA tests. Amid Sutherland's court case, the victim's family filed a $45 million lawsuit against the state of Arizona, accusing them of gross negligence. Now, I mentioned earlier that the staff allegedly didn't know she was pregnant, and they were treating her for constipation. However, the claim states records indicated Hacienda documented at least 83 missed opportunities to identify the pregnancy. Not only had she not gotten her period in 9 months, staff noticed her abdomen sticking out 24 times, a large mass in her stomach 3 times, and a physician reportedly saw her 10 times during her 3rd trimester. It also cited unspeakable atrocities suffered by the victim were a result of systemic mismanagement and virtually non-existent oversight on the part of the state. The parties later reached a $15 million settlement in June of 2021, in addition to a $7.5 million settlement from the state of Arizona. As for Sutherland, on September 2nd, 2019, he changed his plea to guilty after a failed bid in May to throw out the DNA evidence. He spoke directly to the victim in court and said, "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve to be hurt, no matter what was going on in my personal life and the demons I was fighting. I had no right to put you through that. No words can express how sorry I am." He was sentenced to the maximum sentence of only 10 years in prison and a lifetime on probation. The victim was promptly moved out of Hacienda and is now in the care of her family with the support of state-funded medical care, along with her now nearly 5-year-old child. As for Hacienda, the CEO stepped down, there was a huge shakeup of staff and a switch of 2 members on the board. This was a harrowing and extremely emotional case that garnered global attention. Though within the darkness, it shone a much-needed light onto the treatment of vulnerable people in care. It prompted the state of Arizona to make drastic changes to the way their care facilities are managed. Changes to these laws are a small stepping stone, but one in the right direction that could prevent other women experiencing similar injustices in future.